finish things off in the skeletal system here, we need to look at a few disorders or a few problems that can occur. First off is osteoporosis. Now, osteoporosis is actually more of a group of diseases, all grouped together because they're looking at resorption outpaces deposit, which means the body is pulling calcium out faster than it's putting it in. What this ends up doing is causing a decreased mineralization in the bone. Now, this decreased mineralization is causing the bones to become more brittle, not quite as strong as they were. While osteoporosis can occur in both males and females, it's more prevalent in females due to the changes of menopause. So when you start looking at the bone, over here, this is going to be a healthy bone. You can see how the actual spongy bone is nice and solid. There's plenty of trabeculae. But as you move through to the osteoporotic bone, you can notice how those trabeculae just aren't as full. They're not as connected because there's been too much resorption, too much of the matrix has been broken down and pulled back. So the case of osteoporosis is reducing the structural integrity of the bones. They're still there, they still work, just there's a higher risk, unfortunately, of the bones having fractures because they're not as strong. Next up is rickets. Now, rickets is more of a childhood disorder. So you wouldn't necessarily say someone has rickets as an adult. There's a different term we'll get to. But rickets is going to be a childhood. It's based on inadequate mineralization of the bones. Now, from childhood, this inadequate mineralization ends up making the bones not have as much calcium or the hydroxyapatite, but you still have the collagen. So the bones end up kind of becoming a little more flexible. So if you look at the legs, the pelvis, sometimes in the cranium, the bones themselves are bending or moving based on forces applied. It's one of the more common forms of someone who has bow-leggedness, where the actual bones bend out because the pressure placed on the bones of the leg, the bones just can't support it. So the bones start to bend under the pressure. Now, a lot of times this is calcium insufficiency. It could be the fact of not getting enough calcium or not getting enough vitamin D. Either one could cause the same idea. So by having an increase in vitamin D, increasing calcium in the diet, this can help these individuals. It won't necessarily reverse it necessarily, depending on what stage they're at, but can help to prevent further damage or help things grow a little more appropriately if maybe braces are used. So rickets is the childhood version. If you get into adulthood, that's osteomalacia. Same idea. You don't have enough vitamin D or enough calcium in the diet. But now at this point, the adult bones are the full size already. So it's still an inadequate mineralization, but you're not looking at the bones bending anymore. Instead, the main symptom here is going to be pain. Because now the bones, by not having enough mineralization, they're already in the proper shape, but they start to try to flex a little bit, try to move. And the bones aren't meant to bend. So you end up having pain because the bones are starting to bend, starting to move a little bit because they don't have the proper structural support. So same thing as with the childhood version of rickets, increased vitamin D, increased calcium can help to alleviate the symptoms. Paget's disease. In the case of Paget's disease, it's excessive or abnormal bone remodeling, which means it's just remodeling too much over and over and over. Now, it's natural to remodel the bones, but there's a certain pace that can go at that's healthy. So this excessive remodeling, though, ends up having a higher than normal ratio of spongy bone to compact bone. Reason being is spongy bone can grow faster than compact bone. So by having a too high a rate of resorption and remodeling, the body can only get the spongy bone back down. It can't have the time to make the compact bone. This ends up causing reduced mineralization again. So same idea, the bones aren't as strong, can result in pain. Osteogenesis imperfecta, known as brittle bone disease. Now in this case, the biggest thing is the bones are breaking from almost no apparent cause. It seems to be a bump, and all of a sudden that bone breaks. The reason behind it is collagen. The body itself, for these individuals, from this genetic cause, just does not have enough collagen, or the collagen isn't the proper quality. It's not strong enough, which means there's plenty of calcium, plenty of hard, rock-solid mineralization, but you don't have the slight flexibility because of the adequate collagen. Collagen and calcium together give the bone the strength and a little flexibility upon impact. Now, sure, it's not going to stop a massive impact, but it's the idea of in brittle bone disease, these bones are mineralized. Think more like china, crystal. Tap of the hammer just shatters. The collagen helps prevent that from occurring. But with having this genetic basis of not having collagen or poor quality collagen, then it doesn't fortunately have the same stability to it. Osteitis, fibrosa, cystica. In this case, you're looking at increased osteoclastic resorption. So your body's pulling too much calcium, too much of the mineral from the matrix of your bones. By doing that, it constantly pulls out. Your body has to replace it with something. It replaces it more with a fibrous membrane, a fibrous material. Now, obviously, this fibrous material, this fibrous tissue, is not going to be as strong as the bone was. So the bones become weaker. Now, this might be a cause looking at primary hyperparathyroidism. So again, remember, parathyroid hormone, stimulates osteoclast. So hyper means too much. This means too much osteoclast activity, constantly resorption, replacing by fibrous tissue. Achondroplasia. Now, achondroplasia is an autosomal dominant genetic. So what this means is this particular gene, this FGFR3, which is the fibroblast growth factor receptor gene 3, if you're curious, is not functioning properly. So the body's had a mutation in it from birth. What this does is the cartilage just doesn't form properly. So you can still have cartilage, so it can still be bone growth, but it's not going through mitosis as quickly. It's not forming the normal way it would normally form. This results in a slower process, which results in slower growth. The bones just simply don't grow as fast or as long as they normally would, which is why this is a common cause of dwarfism, because the cartilage itself from this mutation just isn't growing. Therefore, the bones that need that cartilage to grow can't grow the same rates. So the idea of achondroplasia, genetic mutation in the FGFR3 gene, if you're curious. So a couple of different disorders, a couple of different problems with the bones. That wraps up the skeletal system.